You might have the impression from turning on the television or reading the major national newspapers that the coverage of President Trump is just kind of, sort of, fairly, somewhat negative. Wow, that turns out to be the understatement of the year. I mean, I watch a lot of this stuff, and you can't escape the fact that the tone seems to be pretty relentlessly against this president. But now we have an actual academic study to back that up, and it's a good one from Harvard Shorenstein Center, which has been studying and chronicling and examining the press for a long time. It looked at the coverage of Donald Trump's first 100 days. You remember that because the press all went crazy over the first 100 days. It was starting about day 87 and continuing past the 100 mark. Okay, so in looking at the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal, and then the main newscasts on CBS, NBC, CNN, and Fox News, what the Harvard study found was that 80% of the stories were negative in tone toward President Trump. 80%, 4 out of 5. It just is almost unbelievable that the scale would be that tilted against a president who has basically just taken office. But when you drill down and you look at individual news organizations, well, it's pretty eye-popping. So, for example, when the study looked at CNN and NBC, 93% of the stories were negative. That means that in everything that was broadcast on those main newscasts, they could only find 7% of stories that were worthy of being positive toward the president in its overall tone. CBS, 91%, just about as tilted. Then you get down to the New York Times, 87% negative. Washington Post, 83% negative. It drops down for the Wall Street Journal at 70% negative. And then Fox News, you know, the slogan's fair and balanced, came pretty close. 52% negative, 48% positive. Just around, almost right down the middle. And you know, Fox gets criticized often by the mainstream media for being too pro-Trump. But actually, if you consider all points of view, and this was a study that looked at Bret Baier's special report, it wasn't too pro-Trump at all. It actually provided both points of view, at least in the esteemed opinion of the Harvard researchers. Now, some of this varied by topic, so the coverage might have been much more negative on issues like immigration, perhaps less so in covering the economy, for example. But in any given week during that first 100-day period, what the study found was that the tone of the coverage went as high as 90% negative, but never below 70% negative, even in President Trump's best week, which is the week that he ordered the airstrikes against Syria after the horrifying chemical attack on some of its civilians. And the reason that all of this maybe feels even more acute than it might otherwise be is, yes, you're right, Donald Trump is inescapable. The coverage of Trump, the sheer volume of it, leaving aside the tone, is almost overwhelming. So what the Shorenstein Center found was that President Trump, on the national television networks that were examined, was the subject of 41% of all news stories. I mean, we're talking about everything that happened in the world, sports, culture, you name it, across the USA, around the globe. More than 4 out of 10 stories dealt with Donald Trump, and often it was Donald Trump talking. He often had a speaking role because he talks a lot and tweets a lot, and that's a big part of the story. This is 3 times the normal rate for presidents in the television era, again, according to Harvard. So, you know, I understand this is a president who creates a lot of controversy. The country is divided. A lot of people don't like this president. A lot of people do like this president. The president sometimes, with his tweets and with the way he uses language, you know, fuels a lot of the coverage. But even accounting for all of that, wow, 80% negative, some weeks 90% negative. I think it's not too much to say that the mainstream media just are not giving this president a fair break. And if it goes on like this, what's happening is the people out there who are either independent or like Donald Trump, I mean, obviously the Trump critics might be cheering this on, are going to lose more and more faith in a mainstream media that simply doesn't seem able to provide balanced coverage of the 45th president.